Hello, lovely ones. Esther here, the tarot artist formerly known as Lisa. I wanted to talk to you tonight about two amazing decks. They're both decks I've talked about before. They're both decks that have been around, one since 1972, the other since 1979. The Morgan Greer Tarot on the one hand, and the Aquarian Tarot on the other hand. This is a 1980s vintage deck. So here's the thing. I mean, these decks, these are amazing decks. The Aquarian Tarot, I was just playing with it today and remembering how brilliant these cards really are. You know, the color, the whiteness, which in the vintage versions is a slightly off-white white. In the modern US Games edition of this deck, the white tends to be starker. The particularly kind of stamen and pistil sort of hermaphroditic feeling of the rods, you know, the sort of flowering but also phallic rod, the sort of Art Deco-y style, the play with textures and depth. The sadness that I see in so many of the cards, this sort of solemn almost quality. This is a regal deck, a deck that I don't think of as particularly joyous, but a deck that I trust completely. And I don't play with it enough. Oh my God, this is one of my favorite cards for some reason, the Knight of Wands, the Knight of Rods. In fact, the court cards in this deck are all kind of gorgeous. The Two of Rods. The figures. Yeah, look at the Knight of Cups. The figures in this deck are gorgeous. Anyway, a deck that I love. And then, you know, the Morgan Greer. A deck that aesthetically is so different, you know, really has this, I always feel like this is a very early 80s deck, even though it was 1979. You know, the mustaches. Oh, I love this Page of Cups. The palette of this deck, the light that I'm in right now is not so great. Anyway, I love this deck. You guys know these decks. So recently, I was playing with my Morgan Greer. This is a vintage brown box, first edition of this deck, came in a brown box. And I was cleaning out a cupboard and I realized I had this, what I call a breaker edition, a blue box, so a little bit later than the vintage brown box. The back of the cards on the blue box are darker, but it's missing 4 cards. So I sort of put it aside. And then I thought, you know what? The internet is an amazing thing. Perhaps someone out there has a equally broken deck and they'd be willing to sell for me the 4 cards that I'm missing. And in fact, I found someone on Facebook, a wonderful person. I won't say her name because I don't necessarily have permission to do so, but I will say that she gave to me 4 replacement cards from this deck: the Fool, the Emperor, Judgment, and the 8 of Pentacles. And you'll notice that they're slightly lighter blue because it was a brown box deck that she had. But now I have now I'm playing with a full deck. What she said, she wouldn't take any money for these cards. What she said, though, is that they were from a deck that now is an incomplete deck that she and her best friend, Ellen, played with years and years and years ago. And Ellen died in a car accident. She's had the deck ever since. She just wanted these cards to be loved and in a good home. And so she She gifted them to me and actually to another tarot reader who was also looking for some replacement cards. So this deck now, which doesn't quite have a complete match with 4 of the cards, but is now like a perfect deck, right? A deck that commemorates this other tarot student and her best friend and their history, and now has a kind of meaning for me that is so deeply precious. There's that. As it happens, the other tarot person who also got some of the cards from that deck that belonged to the friend Ellen, she also, as it turns out, had an Aquarian tarot deck that was a kind of extra and was willing to sell it to me for an absurdly generously low price, knowing how much I love the Aquarian tarot. And so now I have an Ouroboros back. This is from like the first few print runs of this deck, early, before the deck had the cobalt blue backing or the sort of this stylized blue backing. It's a little bit yellowed, but it's a beautiful edition of the Aquarian tarot with this pink Ouroboros backing. So both of these decks, you know, they're vintage decks. They have histories. Both of them come to me out of the generosity of contemporary tarot readers, both deeply meaningful to me, both now deeply treasured, right? I think why I wanted to do this video, though, besides sharing, you know, again, like my two loves, the Morgan Greer and the Aquarian tarot, but I wanted to bring up this idea that's familiar, I think, to a lot of us. You know, a concern when we get an old deck or when a deck is given to us that we need to cleanse it, right? Something that you hear all the time. People concerned about the energy that a deck carries into your home, into your hands. And this idea like, well, I need to cleanse the energy. I want to challenge that idea. Not to say that decks don't carry energy from their prior homes or their prior owners. They carry, everything carries energy, right? The whole world is imbued with all of the karma, all of the love, all of the hate. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all interpenetrated. How could it not be? We're all really in this together. So I'd like to challenge this idea that we need to cleanse our decks. Not to say that they don't come to us with energy, but to suggest that instead of cleansing our decks, instead of doing rituals where we imagine ourselves to purify the energy of the deck, I'd like to encourage us all to do rituals where we honor the energy of the deck, where we make offerings to all the beings whose lives were touched by these decks, by this deck. So I'm going to be on my Buddha altar back there. Before I try to do any readings with these decks, I'm going to be offering incense. I'm going to be offering light. I'm going to be offering water to my Buddha. I'm offering the beauty of flowers. And I'm offering the intention of my heart through prayer. So 5 different offerings. I'm going to make offerings to the beings who have made it possible for me to own and to work with and to acquaint myself with these decks. So not purification rituals, not trying to cleanse my decks, nothing like that. There's no cleansing that I feel needs to happen. Instead, what needs to happen is an offering. So just some thoughts about how to work with decks that come to us with history, and a suggestion that all decks all decks come to us with history, even if the only history that they're coming to us with is the fact that they were made in a factory in China and have been shipped across the ocean in a big container ship and sold to us through Amazon at all of the expenses to environment and humans that journey entails. All decks come to us with history. Maybe we should get in the habit, if we're not doing that now, of making offerings to the spirits that brought them here. to the beings that made it possible for us to practice with these cards. Thank you so much for your practice. Thank you for listening. Take care.